In this video, I'd like to discuss the personal integrity of a City of Austin employee by the name of Izabella Nuckels. She works for the cemetery division and was part of a group of people who were working on a narrative for a new cemetery brochure. In doing so, she was given the facts, co-workers, and other people in the know, as well as the city's master plan, clearly laid out the history of a site, but she intentionally created a false narrative, working with others to create a government document, knowingly placed false information in that document in order to perhaps please her supervisor. This is the west side of historic Oakwood Cemetery. Here's the chapel right here, where this little dot is. We're using Google Earth. The area we're going to be looking at is this area right here. This was the Pauper's Grounds, the Stranger's Grounds. This area over here was the historic African American Colored Grounds. What happened was the city officials wanted to create a narrative that turned this whole area here into something called the Historic Colored Grounds. This is one of the first drafts of the map, and it correctly designates the area in question, Area A and B. It has North Street here. This is West Avenue coming down the middle of it. And it was known by several names. It was known as the Historic Colored Grounds, the Mexican Grounds, the Pauper's Grounds, the Stranger's Grounds. As I said, this area over in here, there's no doubt Section A was, in fact, the Historic Colored Grounds. The Mexican Grounds was over here. The Strangers and Pauper Grounds were for whites over in here. There's whites buried all along here and back in here, and many more that have been lost to time. Now, with the help of Izabella Nuckels, this is what the area looks like. The streets are magically missing from this current map, and the whole area is labeled the Historic Colored Grounds. Knowingly mislabeled the Historic Colored Grounds. Let's look at the emails. Okay, just so we can keep the proper name to a face, this is Sarah Marshall. This is Izabella Nuckels. This is Tanja Walls Davis, who is the cemetery manager. This is Anthony Segura, who is the assistant director of the Parks Department and oversees aquatics and the cemetery division. And this is Kimberly McNeely, who is the director over the Parks Department. Through Open Records, I've received emails between Izabella Nuckels and Sarah Marshall. And so Sarah informs Izabella that she was doing work at the Austin History Center, and she said the stuff I read that Oakwood Colored section was sold out by 1893. And that's why that Evergreen, which was established in 1928, and Bethany, which was established in 1891, was started. And so back as early as March 7th of 2019, Izabella is told by Sarah that the colored section was sold out by 1893. This is important. An email on March 22nd was sent by Terry Merca, who was somebody I worked with for many years with Save Austin Cemeteries. This was sent to several city officials, including Miss Izabella Nuckels, her supervisor, Tanja Walls Davis, as well as Anthony Segura, the assistant director over Parks Department and over the cemetery division. This was made very clear to them, along with a PowerPoint presentation, again, March 22nd. I've highlighted important parts here. It says the area immediately north of the chapel was used for what this Austin City Sexton records as the Stranger or White Grounds. The Bormans, who were European, are the closest remaining gravestones before the chapel was built in 1914, and they were buried in 1872. Due north of them are a variety of remaining headstones for people of European descent. Now, it's important to remember that This area was not laid out for family plots. These were people who didn't have any money or didn't have a family plot, so they were put in this area. Many of them do not have an existing marker. The dates on other headstones near the chapel show that the chapel was built on the Mexican grounds and that the stranger and white grounds, it was all included in the chapel area. And that the property continued to be used for people labeled color in the city records even after the area was declared full in 1891. Again, in 1890. Sarah Marshall has said this. The historic records show this. She goes on to say that these burials were likely atop earlier burials, as the city of Austin Sexton records show over 200 recorded burials in this Mexican grounds. During the time period, this space was being used, and over 800 in the strangers' grounds, burials between the opening in 1859 and 1890. And again, this is part of the older grounds that dates back to 1839, but the city acquires in 1859 from the state of Texas the property. So, Izabella Nuckels was informed. She was given a great PowerPoint presentation, as well as her supervisor and Anthony Segura, about the history of the site, and she chose to ignore it. Sarah Marshall further came back on April 1st. Sarah is starting to get the big picture, things that we've known for many years, things that are discussed in the city's master plan. She says, she's talking about African-American burials in Austin. She said, then I could look at the Oakwood Historic Color Grounds and know how they ran out of space in the 1890s. This place was completely full and sold out. Now, what happens here is on May 2nd, Sarah actually tells Izabella she finds it interesting that the color grounds were sold out in the 1890s, but they sold this land to Anderson in 1911. They're talking about L.C. Anderson. And Izabella Nuckels, that day, talks to Sarah Marshall. She said, I thought you might find this interesting. This is a cemetery deed for L.C. Anderson in the colored grounds. It does not specify a lot or even a reference map that suggests the area may not have been platted. Okay? So, Izabella is starting to understand the dynamic here. We hope. Now, on May 22nd, Anthony Segura, who is the assistant director over the cemetery division, informs Izabella Nuckels and Tanja Walls Davis, Izabella, thank you. It makes sense. We recently found out the majority of those burials were covered from the Oakwood Chapel of our Hispanic descent. The division manager is telling Tanja Walls Davis and Izabella Nuckels the majority of these people are of Hispanic descent. These are all the people that are involved. John Nixon, Kim McKnight, Laura, Cynthia Jeffries, Jennifer Chenoweth, Izabella Nuckels, Tanja Walls Davis, Sarah Marshall. All of these people are involved in this cemetery brochure. And he's talking about historic color grounds. Why is there an asterisk? I don't think one is needed. The asterisk was because there was a footnote. And he says, it's possible that other burials took place in the historic color grounds. The poor, strangers, and others unable to purchase plots may have been buried there. This is why parts of Section 4 lack headstones and other visual grave markers. John Nixon, who's the communications and engagement manager, lights up this red flag, okay? This is at 7:54 a.m. So on the same day, May 28th of 2019, at 10:55 in the morning, Izabella Nuckels writes back to Cynthia Jeffries. She's also copying Justin Snyder. And she's, hey, I hope you had a great weekend. And she said, would it be possible to revise it to be more consistent with the language in the brochure? Izabella writes, in 1859, the City Council set aside a portion of Section 4 for the burial of non-Anglo people of color, in parentheses. Historic records indicate the majority of these burials are African-American people. However, Mexican-American and other non-Anglos may also reside there. Let me know what you think. Thanks, Izabella. This is the language that made it into the final brochure. This is Chapter 4 from the Master Plan, Oakwood Cemetery. And we're going to jump here to page 82. The master plan clearly shows that a portion of section 4 of the old grounds, the original grounds, was set aside as a potter field for the burial of strangers and paupers. It goes on to say that African Americans were also buried in this area after 1900s. The city resold the property. They repurposed it and continued to try to bring income into the cemetery that was sold out. This is Izabella Nuckels, a photo from Facebook with her husband, John. And she did knowingly and willingly and even enthusiastically participate with other city officials in creating a false narrative for a city brochure that's passed out at the historic city cemetery. This walking brochure fits the definition of a government record by the state of Texas. A government record is something that is created by and retained by, in this case, distributed by, a government entity, the city of Austin. Knowingly making a false statement on a government record is a Class A misdemeanor. It's known as tampering with a government record. It's not like it's a court document or part of a police investigation. It still fits the narrative. Why did Izabella participate in this action? You've seen it. She clearly was told by several people, her co-workers, others who have been doing research here for 18 years, that she was going down the wrong path, but she chose to go that direction. It appears that Miss Nuckels is at a crossroads in her career. As early as it may be, she has to decide between honesty and ethics and her integrity in order to gain the respect back of the community and, more importantly, the Hispanic community, which she is denying their heritage. If you want more information about this, you can find it here on another YouTube video. That video is called, Should It Be Called the Historic Colored Grounds? Something I did back in November 23rd of 2019.